Good evening, I'm Jim Lara. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Thursday, then the latest on how a weak U.S. economy could affect the rest of the world. Today in the U.S. presidential campaign, big picture voter reactions from New Mexico to last night's presidential debate, plus a look at the rhetoric and style differences between Barack Obama and John McCain.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lara is provided by Pacific Life has been the power behind successful individuals for more than 140 years. Pacific Life's strength includes assets exceeding $100 billion. So when it comes to planning for retirement, your financial professional and Pacific Life can help you reach your goals. Pacific Life, the power to help you succeed.
With soaring energy prices and global climate change, there are good reasons for believing in wind. Wind energy is clean and plentiful, and it answers the call for sustainable ways to create the electricity we need. We know because our sole focus is developing technology that uses the energy of the wind to generate electricity. America has some of the world's most abundant wind resources, and Vestas is here to help harness them.
Grant Thornton, Chevron, the Atlantic Philanthropies, and with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
U.S. stocks rebounded today after another wild swing. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell nearly 400 points before it made a complete turnaround late in the day. The Dow finished with a gain of 401 points to close at 89.79. The Nasdaq rose 89 points to close above 1717. The rally took off as oil dropped below $70 a barrel in New York trading for the first time in 15 months. The gains on Wall Street came despite rising concerns about the world economy. In London, investment leaders said a prolonged recession is now seen as unavoidable.
It's now a question of really that the Banking Rescue Act has come too late. It should have happened a year ago, but we've covered that ground. It was the abrogation of responsibility in the United States and the United Kingdom to actually investigate how dire the problem was after Bear Stearns that's got us into this mess. And unfortunately, we are staring vertically into recession. It has arrived.
In Washington, Treasury Secretary Paulson acknowledged many errors led to the crisis. He told the Fox Business Network, "We're not proud of all the mistakes that were made by many different people, different parties." Still, Paulson voiced confidence in the Bush administration's $700 billion rescue effort, and White House spokeswoman Dana Perino dismissed talk that investors have no confidence in the president and his team.
I think it's important that leaders be out there talking about what they're going to be doing. And as we all are watching the daily movements in the market, we can't peg our policy decisions exactly to those daily fluctuations. We have to focus on getting out that information. I would submit to you that if we weren't talking and the market had still gone down yesterday, the questions I'd be answering today would be very different.
President Bush will speak about the rescue plan and the economy again tomorrow morning before the stock market opens. There were new moves overseas today on the financial meltdown, but they did little to stop heavy losses on major stock exchanges across Europe and Asia. We have a report on the situation in Britain and elsewhere from James Blake of Independent Television News.
The Treasury and the City had both hoped sudden one-day crashes were over. The £500 billion banking bailout was supposed to restore calm. So either the government's emergency plan isn't working at all, or it's not working yet. And perhaps more crucial than stocks, the interbank lending rate hasn't eased much either. Inevitably, the slump in London was prompted by a similar crash in the Asian markets. Japan has seen some dramatic one-day falls in the past 2 weeks, but none as big as today. The Nikkei was down 11%, the largest drop since those black days of 1987. The Japanese Prime Minister blamed the $700 billion US bailout plan.
It was insufficient, and now the market is again falling sharply.
And in Europe, a sign of just how bad things are, two once mighty Swiss banks, Credit Suisse and UBS, are to receive billions of dollars in emergency government funding. And UBS is transferring $60 billion of toxic debt to the Swiss National Bank.
A two-day summit of the European Union ended today. Leaders of the 27 nations agreed on aid for banks and a possible stimulus package. They also agreed to go ahead with a plan to cut greenhouse gases. French President Sarkozy warned the deadline on climate change is so important that we cannot use the financial and economic crisis as a pretext for dropping it. The U.S. presidential candidates resumed campaigning today after their final debate. In Londonderry, New Hampshire, Democrat Barack Obama warned against overconfidence, despite his lead in the polls. But in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, Republican John McCain said voters won't let Obama use taxes to spread the wealth. We'll have more on the campaign later in the program tonight. The FBI is investigating the activist group Acorn over allegations of voter registration fraud. The Associated Press reported that today. It said a senior law enforcement official confirmed investigations are underway in at least 9 states. The issue came up in last night's presidential debate. Senator Ted Stevens took the stand today at his federal corruption trial in Washington. The Alaska Republicans accused of lying on gift disclosure statements filed with the U.S. Senate. Stevens denied taking part in any scheme to hide gifts, including $250,000 in home improvements. Prosecutors contend the work was done for free. There was word today Defense Secretary Gates supports a draft security agreement with Iraq. It was widely reported to set a deadline for a U.S. pullout before 2012, and it could allow Iraqi courts to try American soldiers for off-duty crimes. Pentagon spokesman Jeff Morrell said Gates is discussing it with members of Congress.
I don't think the Secretary would be making the phone calls he's making today if he did not believe this document adequately protected our forces in Iraq.
Yes, that's a yes.
That is what I just said it to be. He is comfortable with the document that he is calling people about today.
In Afghanistan today, the U.S. military said an Afghan policeman opened fire on a U.S. patrol and killed 1 American soldier. It was the second such attack in less than a month. Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands breathed easier today after Hurricane Omar missed a direct hit. Overnight, the storm passed between St. Martin and the U.S. Virgin Islands with winds of 125 miles an hour. It weakened as it headed into the Atlantic. There were no reports of deaths or major damage. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency today cut the amount of lead allowed in the nation's air by 90%. The agency acted under a federal court order. It means 16,000 smelters, incinerators, and other sources must now cut their emissions. The new lead standard is the first since 1978. Social Security benefits are headed for the largest increase in more than 25 years. The Social Security Administration today announced the cost of living adjustment next year will be 5.8%. More than 50 million Americans will see an average of $63 more a month. Actress and singer Edie Adams died at a Los Angeles hospital on Wednesday. She had pneumonia and cancer. Adams won a Tony Award for bringing the Lil Abner character Daisy May to life on Broadway in 1957. She was also known for her television role opposite her comedian husband, the late Ernie Kovacs. Edie Adams was 81 years old. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now, is a global recession coming to the presidential campaign, New Mexico reaction to the debate, and the styles and rhetoric of the debaters? Jeffrey Brown has our recession story.
Even as Wall Street opened this morning, there were heavy losses in Asia. Japan's Nikkei index fell 11%, and throughout Europe. In the era of globalization, the sun never sets on the financial markets, and now the turmoil and fears of a steep recession are worldwide. We update the situation with Zanny Minton-Beddoes, economics editor for The Economist magazine, Heike Buchter, business correspondent for Die Zeit, a German newspaper, and Susumu Awanahara, a longtime economics journalist and now senior analyst at Medley Global Advisors, an investment consulting firm. Heike Buchter, let me start with you and the situation in Europe. Are the problems there because of what's happening in the U.S. or because of problems of their own, or can those even be separated?
I would say the problems originated here in the U.S., and that's where, in Europe, or at least in Germany, people are thinking this is where the original sin happened, so to speak, and then it came to Europe. But one has to say that the Europeans were ill-prepared. They should have known that this is a global problem, and they should have been much more on the lookout for problems in their own banking systems, and they just waited far too long to deal with it.
And to what extent did the banks there invest in subprime loans and other what turned out to be bad loans?
I mean, the German government just put together a rescue package almost the size of the U.S. It's about $670 billion, 500 billion euro, and that shows you the extent of the government's worry about the banking system. So nobody really knows for sure what's in the balance sheets, but the size of the rescue package is, for German standards, it's enormous.
Susumu Awanahara, what about in Asia, the markets there? Give us an overview of what's driving the turmoil there.
Well, it is very much following the U.S. market. You mentioned that the Asia markets were down yesterday, or I guess today, earlier today, but yesterday. It's going to open again. I wouldn't be surprised that it would rise again. It went down sharply. And before that, on Tuesday, it went up. So the volatility is, I think, going to continue, but it's very much following the U.S. market. Just until a few months ago, the agents were proudly saying that this time there is decoupling, so-called. The idea is that even if the U.S. gets a cold, Asia doesn't have to come down with pneumonia again because there's a lot of trade among Asian countries, a lot of mutual investment. There's a big thing going there, so it won't be so much affected by a slowdown in the U.S. That theory has been blown away. And so we are looking at the U.S., and I think the stock markets in Asia follow, by and large, what happens in the New York markets.
Zanny Minton-Beddoes, help us untangle this sort of globalization, how this works. Do you think of it as things moving in a line from one place to another, or is there a kind of circular blowback that affects everyone at the same time? How do you think about it?
I think it's both of those. I think we are, as you said in your introduction, we're in a globalized world where the sun never sets on financial markets. And I try and think of it in three dimensions. The first one is how countries are linked economically. And so the question is, to what extent the U.S. is in recession, how much does an impact does that recession have on other economies? And that's where people used to think that the emerging economies were decoupled. Now I think that has been blown away, and they're not.
And when you say, I mean, just to stop for a second, we've been talking about Asia and Europe, but you're talking about emerging markets.
Emerging markets broadly. There was a view that the emerging economies had become an increasingly important part of the global economy, and their domestic demand, that their own engines are growing faster.
And so these are countries like
China, Brazil, the big, fast-growing emerging economies. I think that is being increasingly tested, that thesis. But that's not the only link that I look at. The second one is a financial link, if you will. And that's if people are risk-averse, if they're worried, they pull their money out of riskier investments. And many emerging economies are still seen as riskier investments. And then the third link is what you might call the technical link, which is if a hedge fund is losing money in the U.S. and has to raise some cash quickly, it might sell something in Brazil, it might sell something somewhere else in the world. And that's not really an economic link between them at all. It's just a purely technical link within financial markets. And we're seeing...
But it can have economic
It can have a
impact.
huge effect. And we're seeing all of those three things going on at the same time. And that's why we're seeing huge swings in markets outside of the U.S. Because the rest of the world, you've got some of this technical stuff going on. You've got a huge risk aversion. You've got people fleeing into dollars out of riskier currencies. And you've also got a sense of oh my goodness, the world economy is going into recession. It's not just the rich world.
Let's look at the economic impact. Last night on the show we talked about what's happening in the U.S. economy. Heike Buchter, where do you see the economic impact already in Europe? What businesses might be getting hurt? Layoffs? Are there real fears of a very steep recession already?
Very much so. On the official side, the government at least hopes maybe Germany, the biggest economy in the EU still, by large, is sneaking by maybe. And this decoupling theory, which has been totally abandoned by now, but that has been around for the last couple of years. And people loathe to let go of that. But I guess Main Street in Germany is already afraid that this might have a huge impact on the job market. And that's really bad for Germany because the labor market there is much more rigid than it is in the U.S. And whatever jobs we might lose, and people are very well aware that if stock markets are going down, companies will have to cut costs, and they will cut costs when they will shed jobs. And in Germany, it will take a long, long time to rebuild the job market. It took a long, long time to get where we are now, and people are very afraid that they will fall back again.
Mr. Wanahara, what about in Asia? The impact, economic impact, are you seeing it already?
Very much so. Also in Asia, China, for example, is a big exporter to the U.S. We hear anecdotes of industries, whole industries in a region being affected. Anecdotes, so I don't know the real statistics, but sometimes you hear about 60-70% of the toy companies shutting down, maybe for other reasons, safety reasons also, but largely also because of recession or slower growth in the U.S. You hear about containers coming back empty. Going to America more empty, still coming back full because emerging markets are following the developed markets, developed countries in this cycle. So they are still importing as much as before, or nearly as much as before, whereas their exports to the developed countries are suffering.
Zanny, what about government responses now? We know at the beginning, over the weekend, there was the coordinated European response after a period where nothing much was happening. Today, I think it was, or yesterday in London, Gordon Brown called for a new Bretton Woods, referring to the 1944 conference and helped create the post-war economic financial model that we have, the IMF, World Bank. What would that mean today?
Creating a new Bretton Woods?
Yes.
Well, I think Gordon Brown has wanted to do that for a long time. He's been talking about this for years. But I think we've seen three specific stages in this. The first was, up until about 2 weeks ago, governments outside of the U.S., by and large, thought this was primarily a U.S. problem. And particularly in Europe, there was a lot of schadenfreude, a lot of, this is the U.S. problem, it was made in America, it's their mess. And then suddenly and very quickly there was a recognition that this was not just a U.S. problem, that it was a global problem. And I think we had a real shift last weekend at the IMF meetings when there was a recognition that to solve this, it was a global problem, it needed a comprehensive solution, a systemic solution. And I think that's what we saw. We had coordinated central bank interest rate cuts. We've had, as you said, governments across Europe now recapitalizing their banks, guaranteeing lending. And now you've had an interesting twist because the U.S. this week with the bank recapitalization plan kind of followed Gordon Brown's lead. He had had a plan like that for the U.K. before the U.S. did. And so now the Europeans think that they're kind of intellectually in the driving seat and that they can sort of use the oomph from this to set in place broader reforms. And I think Gordon Brown has a point in two ways. First of all, we have a globalized financial market, but we have by and large, we have national supervision, national regulation. It makes sense to try and develop more global norms, more global rules. And secondly, the machinery we have from the original Bretton Woods, you mentioned the IMF and the World Bank, are completely outdated for the kind of world we have. They're dominated by the Europeans and the Americans. The growing powers, the emerging economies, who are becoming increasingly important and to whom economic heft is shifting, need to have more representation, need to be more involved in figuring out what kind of a
global financial architecture, if you will, that's the jargon, we want to create. And so while I don't think Gordon Brown is going to, we're not going to have a conference like we had in 1944 where we totally remake the world economy. That happened, during a war and after a depression.
Exactly.
Things are bad, but they're not that bad. And so as a result, we're not going to have such a big change. But I think we will have lots of meetings to discuss this, and I hope, with luck, we'll get a new kind of multilateralism out of it.
May I come in on that?
Yes, go ahead. We just have a minute, but go ahead.
On the new Bretton Woods, I would like to say on Asia, I think the Asians would insist on being part of the rule-making. As it was mentioned already, they are a lot stronger, a lot more powerful and richer than they were in 1944, of course. And even now, the group of 7, group of 8, have to often invite the so-called BRICS, Brazil, India, China, Russia.
The emerging markets we're talking about, would have to be part of that.
And I think they would want to, they would insist on coming in. I think the Europeans and the G7 trying to have a summit to discuss the new Bretton Woods in the near future. But I think these major developing countries would probably be very quick to insist that they have to be a part of this new world financial order.
All right, Susumu Owanahara, Heike Buchter, and Zanny Minton-Beddoes. Thank you all very much.
Now, a day after their final debate, the presidential candidates were back to campaigning. NewsHour correspondent Kwame Holman reports.
Republican nominee John McCain today took some of the same criticisms of Democrat Barack Obama he used last night into his first post-debate event in Downingtown, Pennsylvania.
The real winner last night was Joe the Plumber.
That included an analysis of the Obama economic program and its effect on one Ohio plumber, mentioned frequently by both candidates a few hours before.
You might recall I related last night, Senator Obama had an encounter with Joe the Plumber, out in Ohio, another battleground state. And Joe the Plumber said, look, I've been working all my life, 10, 12 hours. I want to buy the business that I'm in, but you're going to raise my taxes. And you know what Senator Obama had to say to Joe? He wanted to spread his wealth around. He wanted to spread his wealth around. Now, what does that mean? He wants government to take Joe's money and give it to somebody else. His hard-earned dollars, we're not going to stand for that.
And McCain also repeated his answer to Obama's charge that a McCain presidency would be a lot like that of George W. Bush.
As I mentioned last night to Senator Obama, I'm not George Bush. If he wanted to run against George Bush, he should have run 4 years ago. I'll take us in a new direction. My friends, the hour is late. Our troubles are getting worse. Our enemies watch. We'll have to act immediately, and we need that new direction now, and we have to fight. And that's what America's all about, and that's what I'll do for you.
This morning, Joe the Plumber also came up in Bangor, Maine, where McCain's running mate, Sarah Palin, compared him to another Joe, Democratic vice presidential nominee Joe Biden.
We want to cut taxes because we think like Joe or Jane the Plumber thinks, okay? Our opponents want to raise taxes because they think like that other Joe, that 6th-term senator from Delaware whom I'm running against.
Joe the Plumber is Joe Wurzelbacher of Holland, Ohio, who challenged Obama about his tax plan at a campaign event in Toledo last weekend.
Your new tax plan is going to tax me more, doesn't it?
After the presidential candidates invoked his name more than 24 times last night, Wurzelbacher was thrust into instant celebrity, appearing on several network morning shows today. Caught outside his home, Wurzelbacher was asked which candidate he supported.
At this point in time, I'm not telling anybody anything. You guys want to ask me my opinion's great, but who I'm voting for, that's why it's a private booth.
Meanwhile, Obama today also retread some of the ground covered in the debate. In Londonderry, New Hampshire, he stuck with his comparison of McCain and President Bush.
Now, last night, Senator McCain said that George Bush won't be on the ballot this November. He said, I don't know why you're running against George Bush. I said, I'm not running against George Bush. I'm running against all those policies of George Bush that you support, Senator McCain. In 3 debates and over 20 months, John McCain still hasn't explained a single thing he would do differently from George Bush when it comes to the most important economic issues we face today. Not one.
And he criticized McCain for personal attacks during their face-to-face meeting.
Here's what Senator McCain doesn't seem to understand. With the economy in turmoil, with the American dream at risk, the American people don't want to hear politicians attack each other. You want to hear about how we're going to attack the challenges facing the middle class each and every day.
Though several national polls show Obama ahead, he said a previous experience in the Granite State taught him not to be complacent.
For those who are getting a little cocky, I've got 2 words for you. New Hampshire. I learned right here, with the help of my great friend and supporter Hillary Clinton, that you cannot let up, you can't pay too much attention to polls. We've got to keep making our case for change. We've got to keep fighting for every single vote.
It was a sentiment echoed by Obama's running mate, who addressed volunteers at a campaign office in Columbus, Ohio.
Look at how many headquarters you have here in Ohio. Look what's going on, Mr. Chairman, in Virginia, North Carolina, Montana. I mean, places where we haven't been able to compete in some cases since 1964 in the Johnson landslide. It's because of the organization that you all put together.
Biden will go up against McCain in his own way tonight. He'll appear on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, while John McCain is a guest on The Late Show with David Letterman.
And back to last night's debate. As part of our big picture coverage, Judy Woodruff has reaction from voters in New Mexico.
When we welcome Barack Obama and John McCain.
We invited 8 people, 4 who support Senator McCain and 4 for Senator Obama, to watch the debate with us. Then we sat down together in the studios of KNME, the public television station here in Albuquerque. Leaning toward voting for McCain are Stephen Dinkle, a student at the University of New Mexico, Margaret Forbes, a realtor, Bill Miera, a small business owner, and Ken Heron Singleton, a recruiting manager for a defense contractor. Leaning toward voting for Obama are David Archuleta, an attorney, Pamela Herndon, Deputy Superintendent of Regulation and Licensing for the state of New Mexico, Wayne Lucero, a firefighter, and Tracy Kennard Goodluck, an administrator for a Native American charter school. Thank you all for being with us tonight to talk about what you've just heard. And I'm going to start with you, Stephen Dinkle. What did you hear tonight, if anything, that affects the way you view these 2 candidates?
Nothing. It's pretty much the same thing that I've heard before. This has been a long process, and like I said, we've heard it before. But what I do like is the way that they delivered themselves. Obama was a little bit more, not too aggressive, so to say, and McCain had to show that aggressiveness, which he did.
And Tracy Goodluck, what about you? What did you hear tonight that affected your thinking about these 2 candidates?
Well, I still am leaning for Obama and will vote for him. So I think it definitely solidified my opinions on that end. I felt that he seemed to me to want to really address the issues and talk about the issues and keep putting the American people front and center. I did not hear that from McCain.
Margaret Forbes, was that your take on this debate?
Well, I thought it was a much more, I guess I'll say, genteel debate than the last ones, where they've been really bitter and aggressive with each other and it wasn't valuable, I think, for the whole population.
Wayne Lucero, how did you see it? Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. Obama really talked about the issues, and he said how he was planning on trying to fix them. McCain kind of touched on it here and there.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me come to you, Bill Miera. You came into this leaning John McCain. Did you hear something tonight that affected your thinking?
I'm an engineer by training, and so I like to have specifics. And to me, Obama has a better presence. He's more articulate, but it's all flash and no substance. And when McCain was asked questions, he had specifics.
Pamela Herndon, all flash, no substance on the part of Senator Obama?
I think that is not true. We must not have heard the same debate. I think that Senator Obama focused on the things that the American people are concerned about. He stayed on task with education, with the economy, with health care. And he was very specific about his plan in all of those areas, and he listed exactly what he would do. As a matter of fact, I heard him say over and over, "This is my plan."
Kim Singleton, where do you come down on who was specific, and what did you hear overall?
I saw from McCain, he finally said, "I am not George Bush." Mm-hmm. And I've seen that consistently throughout the debates and the campaign. Obama referring back to Bush, McCain's just like Bush. He's not. He's not just like Bush. So that again, I was almost proud of him for finally standing up for himself.
David Archuleta, I'm coming to you last. Hearing all this, I mean, and what you heard in this debate, did any of it affect what you thought coming in? You were leaning Obama.
I still am. I'm not sure we were all in the same room. I didn't hear everything that everybody else has said. What I did hear is what Kim just said, is that Senator McCain finally stood up for himself. It's the first time he's done that. He's desperate. He has nowhere to go except to now start talking about George Bush and his policies and how he's different. Up to now, he hasn't made that difference, or he hasn't articulated that difference. I'm not sure he accomplished that tonight.
Let's try to bring it back to the debate on that point, because one of the questions tonight was about their vice presidential choice.
I found it ironic, at the risk of sounding cliche, that we were asking Senator, or the moderator was asking Senator Obama about the qualifications of Governor Palin. It was being asked to assess that. When there is question, and really no doubt in my mind, I don't feel that Obama is all that much more qualified, if you will, on paper. And being a recruiter, I look at paper a lot and compare qualifications than Governor Palin.
Do you really feel comfortable, should McCain die, that Sarah Palin become president of the United States? You can't be serious.
I feel that way about Obama, and he's actually running for president.
Yeah, but that's
the point. You're telling me that if something happens to McCain, do I see Governor Palin, do I feel that she's qualified? Yes, I do.
I do want to come back to something that Bob Schieffer brought up, and that was the tone of the campaign, the negativity in the campaign. What did any of you think about that? Margaret?
Well, the tone of the campaign from both parties has been really rather angry, certainly saying things about it. It's like two little boys fighting, rather than two men of stature running for president.
But what about on the negativity point? Two little boys. Wayne, I haven't heard you for a few minutes.
Most of the commercials that I see, and I don't watch that much TV, but most of the commercials that I see are of McCain with the negative ads. He's always talking, Obama voted this way, Obama did this, Obama did that. Most of Obama's campaign commercials that I've seen is a plan of something. He tells us what he wants to do. The latest one, he's sitting in a living room or something, and he's telling us how he wants to, get us out of this economic downfall that we're in.
Senator Obama's not creating policy in those ads. He's pointing fingers. That's what both of them have been doing. It's really a very unpleasant campaign, and
we're all tired of it.
Well, I found it interesting that in the debate, so I'm going to go back to what we watched tonight, the debate, that John McCain was saying, Senator McCain was trying to say that the reason why the campaign had gone so negative was because there weren't these town hall style meetings. That's absolutely ridiculous. There were going to be negative campaigns regardless if there were town hall meetings or not. And I have watched some of those, the campaign trail of Sarah Palin, and I've heard the crowd screaming, terrorists, terrorists. I think that's just, it's horrible.
Yeah, I've also heard John McCain stop in the middle just this past week and basically say that he does
running mate did.
Well, but Obama nor Joe Biden have sat there and really gotten booed by their own people because he was standing up for Barack Obama and basically saying, that's enough. I mean, you do not do that. He's a respectable individual. He is a patriot, and he is a decent human being. And John McCain, from his own party, was criticized for doing just that and showing honor.
I do need to make one comment about the negative campaigning. Well, as these campaigns have gone on and on, particularly those that have been driven by Governor Palin, the excitement and I would say what is almost the venom that is being portrayed there is almost like, I want to say, it's almost like a lynch mob from the early days.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused. Explain to me, are you saying that because there's some radical folks at some giant rally that Senator McCain and Palin have those views, that they're part of a lynch mob? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm telling you that you can control the way in which your rallies are conducted. And I'm saying to you that there does not appear to be enough effort to control that type of behavior.
Coming into this debate, almost every one of you said you wanted to hear more from these candidates, more specifics about their position on the economy, especially given what's been going on in our financial markets over the last few weeks. Did you hear in this debate tonight did you get the kind of information you wanted to get?
I didn't. I think a lot of the specifics that a lot of people, just especially me, I'm not an economy guy, major, for instance. So a lot of it was just right over my head. But I did hear from John McCain lower taxes. So if you think about it, bring that tax lower, you get more business opportunities inside, the government then makes more money. That's how we can get out of it.
Obama wants to reduce taxes on 95% of the people on people making under $250,000. When you lower the taxes, that means people have more money to spend, creating a better economy, and that's what we're trying to get at. But I think what was demonstrated tonight was leadership on the part of Obama, Senator Obama. I think he's got the grasp of the issue.
I did hear something that really helped me understand the positions, and for me it was pretty scary. I heard Obama speaking a lot of rhetoric about, I have a plan and everything. When it got down to the specifics, here's an economic reality. Neither of the candidates can do all of their plans for spending. Okay, when asked what you would cut, Obama only had one item, something in Medicare. John McCain had about 8 different items. Okay, just the opposite. What Obama proposed was, okay, in education, we're going to spend more up front. In health care, we're going to spend more up front. And you can't tax your way out of an economic downturn, okay? That's what I see. The only way he's going to pay for those programs is higher taxes, okay? And we've learned that. If there's anything in history we've learned, you cannot tax your way out of an economic downturn.
What I heard tonight was I heard Senator Obama say he was going to go line by line through the budget and determine those programs which were working and those programs which were not. And those that were not working, he was going to get rid of those. That was one way of helping to create more money for the economy. He also talked about job credits. He also talked about credits for companies that keep jobs in the United States as opposed to shipping them overseas. So I thought he was very specific about the things that he wanted to do, and those were things that were important to me to stimulate the economy.
Okay, we're going to let you make the last point, I think, here.
Real quick.
Somebody has to have...
Going through a budget line item by line item is a classic political non-answer, okay? It says nothing. There's no specifics. All he talked about was investments, and I agree, we got to make investments in education, but that's just a classic political non-answer, and it's not what, it was exactly what confirmed for me that his only plan is let's spend more money.
Judy, you started the program by talking to a McCain person, and I'd like you to end it talking to an Obama person. And so what I would say is the last word is that to go down line by line, as Senator Obama stated, to delete those programs that are not producing and are not serving the American people well is a great idea. So with that, Judy, I think the economy is in good hands with Senator Obama.
Well, thank you all very much, each and every one of you, for watching this debate with us and for having this lively conversation. Thank you all. And I want to finally thank KNME Public Television here in Albuquerque for hosting us this entire week. Thanks to you as well.
The full discussion with New Mexico voters is on our website. Just go to pbs.org, and then, as always, scroll down to NewsHour Reports. And finally tonight, the candidates' language and manner. Ray Suarez has that story.
Last night's debate highlighted how the presidential candidates have sought to portray themselves and respond to each other throughout this general election. Here's that Joe the Plumber exchange.
A couple of days ago, Senator Obama was out in Ohio, and he had an encounter with a guy who's a plumber. His name is Joe Wurzelberger. Joe wants to buy the business that he's been in for all these years, worked 10, 12 hours a day. And he wanted to buy the business, but he looked at your tax plan, and he saw that he was going to pay much higher taxes. What you want to do to Joe the plumber, and millions more like him, is have their taxes increased and not be able to realize the American dream of owning their own business. That's what Joe believes.
He's been watching some ads of Senator McCain's. Let me tell you what I'm actually going to do. I think tax policy is a major difference between Senator McCain and myself. And we both want to cut taxes. The difference is who we want to cut taxes for. Now, Senator McCain, the centerpiece of his economic proposal is to provide $200 billion in additional tax breaks to some of the wealthiest corporations in America. ExxonMobil and other oil companies, for example, would get an additional $4 billion in tax breaks.
With me now to discuss what more we learned about how the candidates present themselves and their views is Kathleen Hall Jameson, director of the Annenberg Public Policy Center at the University of Pennsylvania. She's written over a dozen political science books, including some focusing on debates and rhetoric. And Kathleen Kendall is a research professor at the University of Maryland. She focuses on American presidential campaign communication. Professor Jameson, if essentially these debates are a series of questions asked to candidates about how they would do their job and what they intend to do, well, how did the people make out? Did they get good answers? What was the quality of the argument?
Well, first, what you saw in your tape of voters is that people come into debates with partisan dispositions and very strong opinions. Those who already favor one candidate will take different things out. They'll be selectively perceiving the things that benefit their candidate, and they'll be more critical of the other side. But what the debate does is gives those who know a lot about policy new information, and those who don't know much information as well. There were philosophical differences on the economy that were clarified, and you heard that with your voter group. There were also differences on health care, on trade, on education, on abortion, clarified in this debate. So there's the capacity to learn important issue distinctions. There are also some areas in which people probably came out confused. We came out of this debate thinking that Senator Obama was supporting a single-payer plan. Well, that's not right. And you came out thinking that what Senator McCain was going to do was tax your employer-given health benefits and not give you, as a family, $5,000 to offset those taxes, or $2,500 for an individual. Well, you were misled, too. So some clarification on issues, also some confusion, some clarification about philosophical differences.
Looking at last night, what would you say about the language the men chose to use to describe themselves and their opponent?
One of the things that debates do is help us understand the person who would be president. And so what you saw was Senator McCain going to his background to describe some things that I'm sure most voters didn't know. For example, that he supported the Patient's Bill of Rights. You also saw Senator Obama going back to one of those countercharges in the campaign. What did he do with school reform in Chicago with William Ayers to signal that that was a mainstream effort? He cites Republicans who were involved in the process. They're using language, Republicans involved in the process, Patients' Bill of Rights, to signal a centrism on the part of both candidates.
Professor Kendall, I guess along with what they said, you tried to assess how they said it.
Yes, this is one of the classical canons of rhetoric, one of the things that has been studied since classical times, the delivery of the candidates, how they use their voice, how they stand, how they gesture, how they, the sound of their voice, their eye contact. All of those things are ways that we read meaning into what people say. And it's about the easiest thing for people to look at because it's visual. And so it's the first thing that people tend to talk about. In fact, I was surprised and impressed that the focus group that we just heard did not talk extensively about the delivery, because that's the most, superficial thing, but it's also the first thing people notice.
Well, what was an important contrast for you?
Well, for example, in the first debate, John McCain was criticized by the media and by the public for looking down all the time. He was looking at his notes, he was taking notes, and he didn't look at Senator Obama. Now, just as Professor Jameson has said, we perceive things in different ways depending on what we expect. And so you could interpret that as being a sign of evasiveness, looking down, because in our society we place a premium on direct eye contact. Or you could say, well, maybe he wasn't very well prepared that night, because remember he flew back to Washington to work on the on the crisis, the financial crisis. Maybe he didn't have much time to prepare.
And last night?
Or hostility. You might read that as hostility. So there were different interpretations. Last night he was quite changed in his physical delivery, in that he looked right at Senator Obama. He smiled. He also praised him. These things are linked. The words and the delivery can be linked, of course. So there's a much friendlier kind of atmosphere.
Bob Schieffer alluded to it last night, Professor Jameson, that maybe these men wouldn't be willing to say to each other's faces the things that they had been saying about each other over the airwaves. Is it different when the two men are not only on the same stage, but in fact seated just a few feet from each other and looking at each other and speaking to each other? Is the nature of the confrontation different?
Yes, it's very difficult when you're at very close quarters to say anything that's uncivil to somebody else and about somebody else. And as a result, we should encourage more of those kinds of debates rather than less of them.
At one moment, there was a split screen at several moments during last night's debate, and TV tends to create these high contrast moments. Does a candidate have to keep in mind his physical appearance when tens of millions of people are watching?
Yes, I think that may account for the fact that McCain, and I've seen other candidates, write a great deal, because at least they look like they're doing something, knowing that the camera might be on them at any moment. One of the things about the debates that is unique, and this has to do with delivery, but the whole thing is that you see two candidates side by side. And this is the only occasion where you see that. That's one of the special things about the debate. And of course, you see the moderator too, so you have three people present. And so at all the other speaking occasions, you just have one candidate, so that people can learn about these individuals, seeing them side by side and hearing what they have to say.
Does that close quarter and the fact that it is such a high-stakes moment make the use of sarcasm, humor, even flashes of anger potentially riskier or hold potentially greater payoff?
I think it makes it riskier, and you see different interpretations of, particularly of the way McCain, in his attacks on Obama, used his voice and his facial expression. So with some people interpreting it, him as not only aggressive, but also mean-spirited when he would attack Senator Obama, whereas Obama was described as calm and cool and quiet. And so it sounds like there's a sort of a level of tolerance that people have for aggressiveness or sort of punchy, attacking style in a seated format. Now, I must say that was also a criticism in the other formats where, for example, you had a more formal setting with the podiums, the speakers behind the podiums in the first debate. The second debate was the town hall debate. But in the first one, too, Senator McCain was criticized for having a kind of mean-spirited tone. But others could just say that's toughness. And so the interpretation is different.
Professor Jameson, John McCain said today that the star of last night's debate was Joe the plumber. And as a piece of persuasion, as someone who sifts through language and tries to understand why people bring up the things they do, what role was Joe the plumber playing last night?
Joe the plumber helped Senator McCain control part of the agenda of the debate. But Joe the plumber also set up a very concrete example that both campaigns could now play through in the following days. And what we're going to find out as the fact checkers sort the world out is that if Joe the plumber only makes $40,000 a year, he in fact benefits more from Senator Obama's plans than he does from Senator McCain's. If, however, he founds his business and he makes more than $250,000, well, he's going to see a tax increase from Senator Obama. And on the health care plan, we found an area of real confusion because Senator Obama hasn't specified when people are going to be paying a fine, how many people have to be in a business to call it a small business, how much dollar amount does the business have to be classified small business. So when Senator Obama says, well, small businesses are exempted, Joe, don't worry, the fact checkers and news people are now saying, but Senator Obama, you haven't specified what constitutes a small business. That may actually advance this dialogue. So Joe has made concrete, very abstract proposals. And as a result, I think he's advanced this process very importantly.
Made them concrete, but also as someone, as a symbol, as a living symbol. Was he meant to be evocative of a certain kind of American? Just the fact that we were calling him Joe the
plumber. We all know plumbers, and so, of course, we can all relate to that. And I think it goes way beyond a soundbite, and that this will be the best remembered of the three debates because of Joe the plumber. Because we can all, the term was used many times. We can all identify with Joe the plumber. And as Professor Jameson has talked about, it was woven through the issues that were discussed, having to do with the economy, having to do with the positions of the different candidates. The way Senator Obama picked up on it, you're right, Senator McCain changed the agenda by bringing him up, but Senator Obama then joined in with Joe the plumber. So I think stylistically and in terms of the arguments and even the organization, Joe the plumber, had an influence on last night's debate.
Professor Kendall, Professor Jameson, thank you both.
You're welcome.
And again, the other major developments of this day, Wall Street had another wild swing. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell nearly 400 points early, but it ended with a gain of 400. And Treasury Secretary Paulson acknowledged many errors led to the financial crisis, but he voiced confidence in the government's rescue effort. And once again, to our honor roll of American service personnel killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. We add them as their deaths are made official and photographs become available. Here in silence are 10 more. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening with Mark Shields and David Brooks, among others. I'm Jim Lara. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by...
The world is changing, and how we use energy today cannot be how we use it tomorrow. There is no one solution. It's not simply more oil, more renewables, or being more efficient. It's all of it. Our way of life depends on developing all forms of energy and to use less of it. It's time to put our differences aside. Will you be part of the solution? Chevron, human energy.
When someone you count on is not responsive, bad things could happen. Grant Thornton believes it's important to be responsive through direct client access to our partners. Grant Thornton.
Pacific Life. Vestas. And the National Science Foundation.
Spirit Mountain.
You are a coyote. Only bipeds go to Spirit Mountain.
But Spirit Mountain's bigger, silent, more slots, more tables, new, bigger buffet, and Bingo's back.
Coyote. Wait, how about this? Always the mental run to the litter.
Oregon's biggest casino expanded enormously. The most slots and the new 450-seat Cedar Plank Buffet.
Emirates International, raising, leveling, and moving the world one house at a time. Do you have uneven floors, wall cracks above doors or windows? Your foundation may be settling or cracking. Emirates can help you stabilize, raise, or replace your home's foundation. For over 40 years, Emirates has helped homeowners safely restore and improve their home investment, even doubling the square footage by adding a basement. Emirates has the experience to repair and stabilize your most valuable asset. Call Emirates International today.
I've been sent into harm's way before because of unpermitted work. The fact is that building permits and the accompanying safety inspections protect the lives of your family, neighbors, and firefighters. Measure 63 is poorly written and would take away these essential safety measures. Measure 63 would even allow dangerous unpermitted work on electrical wiring, structural supports, and gas lines. For a safe home and peace of mind, vote no on Measure 63.
The grand opening of Oregon's largest flooring center, just south 503 Carpet.